Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Before we dive into today's episode 17, I just have to say I'm super excited for several reasons. This, as you're going to hear, is a wonderful interview with special guest Brad Shreffler. This was exciting because I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation on how to create a positive classroom climate at the secondary level. I found myself very surprised by some of Brad's strategies, surprised in a very good way, especially when he hits on the way that his class is so student-centered and the way he gets that going. I wish that we all could be doing this. It made me really think about my own practices in my classroom. And I think that's what, this is why we're doing this, is to get us thinking about different ways. And again, I don't have all the answers and I don't claim to have all the answers. That's not why I do this, but it's just like having any other conversation with colleagues and just seeing different perspectives. So it was such a great interview. But aside from that, it was also my first remote interview. So that in itself was super exciting. So I'm just so excited for this episode. Now, Brad and I originally connected through the Teachers Who Podcast Facebook group, which is a group that, well, if you listen to these episodes, you hear that group advertised all the time. But I started that after I began podcasting and was really seeking a support group, I guess, in a sense, and meant at the minimum, a network of teachers who are doing exactly what I'm doing. So that's how we connected, and I have been listening to his podcast. Actually, it turns out that he started his the same time I started mine, all coincidental. But I've been listening to his and really enjoy it. It's Planning Period podcast, and I'll have links to his show and everything. I really do suggest that you go and check out his show, especially if you enjoy this interview. I've been really enjoying his shows, and it was one of his recent shows where I heard him talk about something and I thought, oh, okay, I need to have a conversation with him, just because it really went into what this whole series 4 is on creating a positive classroom climate. And I love the fact that he's at the secondary level, and I wanted to get a secondary educator's perspective, so it just worked out very perfect. But I will add links and everything in the show. But yes, I do encourage you to please check out his show if you are enjoying the interview, because he has such wonderful conversations. In fact, every one of his episodes are conversations with educators, which I've been really enjoying that format on his show. And for me, as someone who's been, teaching in Mexico for quite some time, it's also a way that I feel like I can connect to maybe current issues, as his guests really kind of dive into issues as they see it and experience it, and really bring it back to their own personal experiences. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the interview with Brad Shreffler. Okay, welcome back to Time to Teach, and I'm very excited because today we have Brad Shreffler with us as a special guest. And Brad, will you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Tammy, for having me. I appreciate it. And so my name's Brad Shreffler, like you said. I am the host of the Planning Period podcast, as well as now I'm a curriculum resource teacher in Central Florida for a large high school Prior to that, I was the digital coach for 2 years, and then I taught English for a handful of years before that at the middle and high school level, all in a couple different schools in Central Florida. So it's kind of been where I've done most of my career. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm very excited. And also, so the audience knows, I'm going to have links to your podcast, which I really recommend. I've been really enjoying it. And in fact, one of your most recent episodes where you had Vicki Davis, and I will include it. Yes, I loved that one. And that was the one where I listened to that and I just thought, okay, I need to have you on. Because you mentioned something about how you don't give a whole lot of teacher referrals. And I've been doing a whole series on positive classroom climate. And I have some experience at the secondary level, but it is limited. So I thought it would be really fantastic to have someone who can kind of talk about at the secondary level what you do to create that positive classroom climate. And so I don't know. I think I'll let you maybe, if I know you said you had some kind of ideas that you wanted to talk about, but and I definitely have some views too, but I'd like to hear from you. So at a secondary level, what is it that you do to create a positive classroom climate?
Yeah, it was funny because I kind of made an offhanded comment about how I don't write referrals, and I stand by that. And it wasn't even something I really thought about when I said it to Vicki, but it's always been, well, I shouldn't say always, but after my first couple years of teaching, it's been my belief that writing referrals for a student in middle or high school, so at the secondary level, is really not in the teacher's benefit for the majority of situations. And now, the exception would be something that's absolutely a danger to a student or something like that. But for regular behaviors, even to the level of maybe cursing the teacher out or something like that, in most cases, to me, writing a referral shifts the locus of control in my classroom to the administration. So as soon as I write a referral, I'm telling that kid, I can't control you, so someone else is going to have to. And the problem is, writing a referral doesn't get that kid out of your class for the rest of the school year because they're back tomorrow, and you've already proven you can't control them. And so you run into a lot of problems, in my experience, writing referrals because you have proven you have no control. And I think what that ultimately comes down to is that relationship management, and that's going to sound obvious to most teachers, but relationship management is what it comes down to. My kids are going to behave exactly like I expect them to, so long as they respect me and I respect them. And when one of those things breaks down, that's when we run into a problem. Yeah,
you know what? I love that you said that, because that was something I had written on my own notes, that is really key. It comes down to relationships. I mean, that is the first thing that we're trying to do as the new school year starts. We're starting to get to know our students. We are starting to build a rapport with them. It really does come down to relationships. And the thing I see with teacher referrals, and sometimes, yes, they are necessary. They are. I have written teacher referrals. I'm not saying anything necessarily against teacher referrals. But it tends to be that if there is some kind of behavior, and let's say it's a repeated behavior, the referral itself doesn't usually get to what the issue actually is. It doesn't, if there's something going on, if there's a reason for the behavior, the referral itself doesn't typically stop it. It's really trying to figure out what's really going on with the student. And sometimes there are things that might be going on, and sometimes it could be because perhaps the structure of the class, or various things that could be happening. So when you talk about relationships, do you have any tips or anything that you'd like to share about how you build a relationship at the secondary level, like things that have worked for you, things that you've experienced, things that you've seen, tried?
Yeah, absolutely.
trusted.
I was trying to explain this to my fiance yesterday or the day before when I said, oh yeah, I'm doing this interview and this is what we want to talk about. And I was looking at sort of your thoughts and what you wanted to cover. And she was like, well, how do you do that? And I was like, I think one of the things it comes down to is understanding that the students in my classroom at the secondary level just want to be treated like adults. That's all they want. They want to be treated with respect. They want to be treated like adults. And if you can do that, if you can treat them almost like, I don't want to say like an equal, but if you can come at them from a position of, I'm asking you to do something I'm doing myself, and you can come at them from a position of respect and mutual respect, you'll go a long way. But I think the flip side of that, though, is understanding that at the end of the day, they really are just children. We had this interesting chain going back and forth at my school last week, and one of our union reps emailed the entire admin team complaining specifically about referrals and how the admin team or the discipline team was asking teachers to perform interventions, at least 3 interventions in the classroom for behavior issues before writing a referral. So that may just be one time doing a redirect, another time making a quick, a written detention, for example, a teacher-led detention, and the third time a quick contact home to a parent. So, basically saying that once you write the referral, it's now a repeated misconduct issue, so we can raise it up a level and make it a more serious offense. Because if you're taking the time to write a referral, it should be something pretty serious. And the union rep was saying, well, now you're asking teachers to document on this form, then you're asking them to document on this our online grading system. Now you want us to document it on the referral, and it's way too much work for the teachers, and blah, 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 blah. And these these students are high school students, and with the exception, and I cannot believe this phrasing, but it's with the exception of self-contained and varying exceptionality students, they're high school students, and they know what they're doing wrong. And I could not believe that a veteran teacher would write that at any grade level. And I think it's really important for us as teachers to remember that ultimately they're still kids. Even at 18, if you're a college professor, they're still kids. Developmentally, the human brain doesn't truly understand the idea of consequences until 25 is what the research shows now. Right. They don't really get it yet. They're doing the best they can, and they're mimicking what they see in most cases, and they're trying, but they're not disrupting your class because they don't like you 9 times out of 10. They're not disrupting your class to disrupt your class. There's a bigger problem. The disruption is a symptom of a disease that needs to be addressed. And so often we try to give, metaphorically speaking, it would be like a doctor saying well, you have cancer and it's causing you really bad nausea, but we don't want to do anything about the cancer, so here's some anti-nausea meds. That's not what you would do. And that's so often what the plan is for teachers.
Yeah, that's so true, Brad. And it also, I'm kind of right now going through a personal struggle in my own classroom because we use the color, the clip chart behavior system. I don't know if you're familiar with that, being that you're at the secondary level, but it's like a stoplight system for behavior. And
I remember personally being on yellow and red a lot as a kid. Okay. That I remember.
Remember that, Brad. Okay. Okay. So it sticks with you, audience. Just hear that. It sticks with you through life. I'm really trying to get away from that kind of system. Granted, that is not a teacher referral, but to me, it still has a lot of it has a negative stigma to it. And the thing is with a system like that, the kids all know, even if you're discreet, the chart is usually somewhere where students can see it, because they're typically the ones changing their colors, so they have to access it. So they know, did someone move down to yellow? Did someone move down to red? And it becomes all about the colors. And I think it takes basically the emphasis off of the behavior and puts it onto the color. So I have for years used this system only because I've not really been able to find anything else. But I'm going through my own personal struggle of wanting to really move away from things like that. And I am actually, even though I'm quote unquote using this system, I'm in week 4 and I have yet to ask a child to move his or her color. So I'm very excited about that because I'm really just trying to focus on logical consequences, natural consequences, and really trying to work on the relationships in the classroom. And so when you say that typically if there's some kind of behavior, it's like what you say, it's a symptom of something else that's going on, and we as teachers should get to the root of it. So is that new for your school that they would have different steps prior to the referral? This is something new?
No, that's been the case for a long time.
Okay.
And it's more of a documentation thing, showing that the teacher has made the attempt to deal with the issue. I think, especially for new teachers, and oftentimes even for veteran teachers that are just done with it or feel like their class isn't to the right level or whatever else, it's easy. They sometimes look at the referral as, I shouldn't have to be dealing with discipline in my class, so it's someone else's problem. I need to just teach.
Right.
And that's, again, I would say a very short-sighted view, because that's showing that, number one, the kids are unhappy in your class for some reason. Something about your class is frustrating them or stressing them out or bothering them on some level. And that means it's something you need to address. And it could be something totally personal to that kid, or it could be something that's bothering everybody. And whatever that is, it is preventing the learning. More than the kid disrupting your room, that's preventing students from learning. And if your goal is to teach, the first step has to be to get the respect of your kids. And that means you don't have discipline problems. Your kids respect you. Because I'll tell you, you have in here one of the questions, is there anything specific I do in my class, like a classroom management system? And the answer is no. Because ultimately mine comes down to relationship management. My kids respect me because I respect them. And if I give them a look, they get themselves back in line without me saying a word. And, that's often all it takes. And I don't like to have a formal discipline structure in place, because every kid needs something different based on what they're doing. And in 98% of the cases, it's some sort of attention-seeking behavior, but what they're seeking or why they're seeking it is what you really need to get at, and finding ways to give them that attention in a positive way instead of making them work for it by disrupting the class.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree too, and I feel the same way, when I'm working with my students. I agree, if there's some type of behavior, it's a symptom of something else that's happening, and I do work really hard at trying to get a very positive classroom climate going so that students feel motivated on their own, and it's not some kind of color system or anything else. Now, sometimes there is going to be something that happen, and we do the same thing too, where we will do redirects, we will contact parents, and at our particular school, we have pretty good parent support, so they will get involved and they will help out. And then, of course, finding any accommodations that, for my students who are like 6 years old, sometimes it's just, I can't sit in my carpet square, I need to sit in my chair, or things like that. That's not really behavior, it's just they really, can't actually sit for a certain period of time. But I guess one of the big reasons why I'm very interested in this is actually when I did my master's. This was my area of research, was a positive classroom climate, and it was because at that point, I was in California because I'm from California, and the school districts where I was in, they were very rough districts. So I became very interested in, okay, how do you create that climate that is going to really get every single student, even your most challenging student, will do well in this. And there were some themes that came out of the research that I did, and literature that I read. So a few things, and I'll ask you maybe what your experience of this in the classroom, but one thing, and you kind of hit on some of it, is collaboration between teacher and student to student collaboration. I'm wondering what has been your experience with collaboration, with student choice, anything like that. How much collaboration goes into your classroom?
Well, in my classroom, I don't want to do all the work. My job has plenty of other things that keep me busy without lecturing 7 periods straight every single day. I've got plenty of other things I need to do because I can't possibly sit there and lecture and also monitor my students and make sure they're all learning and everything else. So I need to do other things. And at the end of the day, the students are going to learn better by doing the work themselves. So I think my last year in this like traditional classroom, when I taught 9th grade English for the last year, I did 1 day of lecture the entire year. Maybe 2 if you count syllabus and like rules at the beginning of the year. I just don't do it. There's no reason to. There's really not. Kids don't hear what you're saying. I end up having to repeat myself 27 times, and they're going to get way more out of me telling them individually or in small groups the same information. And yeah, that means I repeat it more times, but they're actually going to get it that way because I'm going to be giving it to them in a natural environment when they're working with the skill. And that's number one in my room is collaboration is absolutely critical. There's no reason they should never be working together. How often has your boss ever come to you and said, hey, I need this done, and you're not allowed to get any help?
Right.
It doesn't happen. You need to know those skills in life. So collaboration is critical. But here's the thing about it is if I'm not up in the front of the room talking, then there's no way for a student to interrupt me being in the front of the room talking. They can't cause a classroom disruption because everyone's talking all the time anyways. So They can be off task, and that's a lot easier to redirect than I want to disrupt you in the middle of your train of thought and mess up your lecture and draw every eye in the room to me, because you can't do that if everybody's got their heads together working in groups of 4.
Okay, I'm very intrigued by this. And I think the audience will be too, because I think that sometimes as teachers, we feel like, oh yeah, I have to be lecturing all the time. But something I always say is teaching does not equate to learning. So I can be standing up there and I can be talking all day long. But I think we remember 5% of what we hear. So I'm of the belief that students really need to be doing the majority of the work. Now,
listen, I don't even remember 5% of what I say. We're 17 minutes in. I have no clue what I've said so far.
I think that's probably true for me too. I'm lucky to remember what I did this morning. I don't know. But yeah, it's so true. But I'm curious how you do that at the secondary level, because I have a feeling that secondary teachers are going to be interested in how to do this. I mean, I know at the elementary level, we do a workshop model. So anyone who's familiar with Lucy Calkins' reading, writing workshop, and then I include that even in math. My teaching, quote unquote teaching, is 10 minutes, more or less, give or take. And then students are off doing, using that strategy within their own work while I can confer or work in small groups. So how does that work? You said you lectured maybe once or twice a week.
Once or twice for the year. Once or twice for the year, I think, is more accurate.
Wow.
I didn't do it because there's no reason. So I'll tell you what, in an English class, here's what it looks like for me. Ultimately, the vast majority of our Florida State standards, which they're Common Core, we just added cursive. So Florida State standards are Common Core. We didn't want to say we did Common Core, so we just added cursive, and it's exactly the same otherwise. So, but the Florida State standards, by the time they get to high school, for English at least, almost 98% of it is about being able to find evidence from the text to support the description or answer to your question. So all it comes down to is giving them 1,000 passages of fiction and nonfiction, giving them evidence-based questions, and making them do them. And then all it becomes is this very individualized work with each group and say, okay, why are you struggling with this? Oh, well, you don't recognize how this one event leads to the next. Okay, well, let's talk about the general concept of one event leading to the next. And then you're walking around and you're listening to the kids' conversations and you hear the same concern coming up in 4 different groups. And I just end up standing in the middle of the room, and there's really not a front, a back, or a side anyways, because everybody's facing in different directions if you have them all grouped up. But standing in the middle of the room, I go, hey guys, real quick, noticing everyone's having an issue with this. Here's what this means. Here's how you would use it. Here's what that process looks like. All right, we all good? Get back to it. And it's more about, I guess you'd call it triage or redirect and fix right there in the moment based on what you're hearing. So, you hear it all the time, but I become the facilitator of learning in the classroom, not the sage on the stage, because they don't care what I have to say. And then all of those conversations are personal. So they're one-on-one, me with a student. And yeah, I know that I say the same thing 20 times a day because most of these kids have the same problems with the general portion, or they have the same 3 or 4 different problems in a given passage. So yeah, I end up saying the same thing 1st through 7th period, just like I would if I were lecturing. But because I'm saying it to small groups at a time and I'm including their name, or I'm adjusting or looking them directly in the eyes, it is a personalized connection. So they may not remember 5% of what I say when I'm standing in front of the room talking to 25 of them, but if I'm talking to 4 of them about a specific problem they just had, they remember a heck of a lot more than 5%. And I've built that personal connection with them to where they go, wow, he really cares that I know this. I better learn it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because it does. And also, so it does make it more personal. So you're building on the relationship, like you say, and they're actually getting to use that information in context to what they're doing. I feel like a lot of times when we're lecturing, because they're not sitting there and doing it, it's kind of like in one ear and out the other because they're not using it in context. Even when, like, I will do a teaching point and then sometimes send them off to their seat to do what they just looked at me doing, or I'll have them come back to the carpet. But I'm going to be honest, I've got to repeat myself and explain, yes, we're actually doing what you just saw me doing. And I will have just told them. So I like that because I think if you're sitting in the small group, they're able to actually put that into context. It makes sense to them as opposed to listening to you lecture and then trying to apply it when it actually makes sense to what they're doing.
Well, and you know what else happens all the time for me, Tammy, is I have 25 kids in my class, and I have them grouped up in groups of 4 or 5. So I've got 5 groups or so, and I'm walking around the room and I'm helping group number 1. And then I notice that group number 5 on the other side of the room has a problem. And so I go all the other side of the room and I'm helping group 5. But if I'm paying attention, group 2 ends up having the same problem and goes, hey, group 1, what did Mr. Shreffler just say that to fix that problem you just had? Because we're struggling with that too. And then someone in group 1 gives group 2 the answer so that they have it, and I didn't even have to tell them that. And that's not explicitly taught by me because they learn a heck of a lot better learning from their peers. So I don't have to repeat it every time. And they start to know who to go to in the room. And then the other thing I do is my groups change constantly. I move them around all the time. My desk configuration changes. It might be groups of 3 one day and groups of 5 another day, and 2 big groups a third day, and it might change 3 or 4 times in a week how they're seated, and I don't give them assigned seats in most cases because I don't keep a seating arrangement long enough to make a seating chart. And so they know everybody in the room, they're working with all the students in the class, and they know who they can go to and who everybody's strengths and weaknesses are. And so do I, because I know based on grouping who struggles with what and which kids ask me the same questions over and over again and which ones have problems with this, that, and the other. And that constant movement, because now I'm not wasting any of my class time trying to get the class quiet, trying to get everybody focused. Everybody's going to get a sheet of paper to take notes or get their laptop open to take notes on. Everybody's got to be listening to me. I've got to stop because this kid has to go to the bathroom, or I got to stop because this one had another question and it broke my whole train of thought. And I got to stop because this one thinks they're funny over there wiping their nose under a desk. I don't know. Like, they're high schoolers. You would think they wouldn't do that stuff, but they do. And and I would stop a million times and I'd waste half my class period on what should have taken me 5 minutes if I just talked to 4 people at a time. And now I have all that time left to monitor and take notes and reflect and get data on how these kids are doing. And that observational data, anecdotal data, is critical to knowing how my students are performing.
I absolutely agree 100% with that. And on top of that, they are doing the work. You're not. They're doing the work. And I feel like that's what students need to be doing. Gosh, I would love to have this on video. I feel like we need to see this. I just feel like this is so good. Oh, I'm not saying you have to get on video. I'm just saying definitely this is this is how I really feel like classrooms should be operating. I really strongly believe that. But I do know that, sometimes it's difficult, I think, as teachers, if you're used to not doing it that way and being the one who lectures. Sometimes it's hard to just envision how it could look, But
I agree with you, but I have to say this, Tammy, and sure. I agree with you. It can be hard to envision. But here's what I'm struggling with as a coach a lot is, yes, it can be hard to envision, but your curriculum is not so tight or so critically important that losing one class day to try something new is going to make or break your kids' chances at going to an Ivy League college. And I think sometimes teachers tie it that closely in their minds. And what they need to remember is trying something new one time yourself, just like the students. I can sit here and tell you about flexible grouping and about student-based learning and about collaborative and cooperative learning, and I can explain it till I'm blue in the face. But until you've actually practiced those skills, just like the students, it's not going to make sense to you. And so you need to just try it. Pick something and take a risk. Do something that you are sure your kids are going to fail at, because that is when they will blow your minds.
Yes, I agree. And I think this is what I think about that. I think sometimes it could be difficult if someone feels like it's hard to fail, right? So growth mindset, I know we hear it all the time, but I personally, when I try new things, I go in, I usually say, this is going to be a hot mess. We've never done it. It's going to be a disaster. Not in a negative way, but I just know that every time we do something new, it's not going to come out exactly as I would hope it would. But I feel like that personally is what helps me to go ahead and do these things that maybe otherwise I wouldn't. So I guess my advice for teachers who might feel a little reluctant would just be, give yourself room to fail, because it probably won't go well the first time. But it's like anything else, that if you just keep practicing, it will get there. So I think that that's part of it. And possibly, I think a school can maybe help to just let teachers know that they are supported and it's okay if a mistake happens. But yeah, I know it is sometimes difficult to feel like I'm getting off track and this may not come out exactly the way I want it. So it could definitely be an obstacle for teachers. You hit on something that I wanted to talk about a couple of things actually, but I'm going to go back to, you talked about your group. So your example was one group will be able to explain to another group. I just wanted to make a note that I feel like that also is very empowering to the students, because now they have a bit of knowledge. They can reteach something. And it's also, I feel, very reflective of, okay, this is what other students are doing. This is even maybe now how I can improve my work. We do a lot of work in partnerships. We do that in reading and writing. And I always tell my students, just like any tool that we have, so your writing checklist is a tool, your ABC chart is a tool. Our word wall is a tool. Your partner is also a tool. And a lot of times we have the partners actually look over student work and they become reflective, because sometimes when you're looking at your own work, we do need to have our students, we do need to teach them how to be reflective of their work. And that is something that we have to explicitly teach them how to do. But I think the same is true for students also learning how to do a peer review and look at another student's work and reflect on their work, because sometimes they've looked at their own work and they no longer see what errors, or they no longer see how to improve. But by reflecting on another student's work, they can help that student and oftentimes internalize, okay, maybe I can improve my own work too by something they saw in a student's work. So I'm kind of curious if your students, and again, this was back when, because right now you're the curriculum specialist or the curriculum resource teacher, so we're reflecting back on when you were teaching English. Did you say it was last year?
It's been 3 years now. This is my third year out of the classroom. So
third year out. Okay.
Yeah, so definitely, I the word I keyed in on there was empowerment. So student empowerment is critical. And what I love about, I guess, my way of doing it, which I don't really think I necessarily innovated. I just think I listened to some other people and made my own approximation of what they were saying. But what I loved about the way the groups would interact in my situation is because so often a group was asking a group I just talked to, it wasn't necessarily that they were always asking that one smart kid in the class, And so I think a lot of times when we talk about this student empowerment, we end up saying, oh, well, this particular kid knows everything already or is one of my smartest kids, so he can always answer the questions. We'll just make him the student leader and everybody will go to that kid. And, that's a good place to start. I think that's fair. But it's not enough in my eyes because you're still sort of creating this inequity in your classroom where this kid's always the smartest, so always go to him, and it makes it, I don't know, it almost stifles competition and doesn't allow for collaboration because that kid is always sort of put above by the teacher. So because of the way I did flexible grouping and moved them around constantly, there wasn't always one group that was the best. There wasn't always one student that was the best because, whoever the highest scoring kid on one section may not be the highest scoring on the next. And not only that, even if they were now with a group of 4 different people. And so they may not have the 4 other strongest people or whatever. So I would notice whatever group I would go to first becomes the experts. It's not just whichever group had the smartest kids. It was whichever group got me first. And so I rotated where I started around a room. I was never tied to my desk. Thankfully our school had laptops for all the students and teachers. My last year in the classroom, the students didn't have them yet, but I did. So I had a laptop and I wasn't tied to a spot. So I moved around the room constantly with a laptop in my hand. And wherever I had to be, that's where I worked from. So, I didn't get stuck to always following the same patterns of movement in my classroom. But that empowerment is critical because once the students feel ownership and once they teach it, they know it so much better than me teaching it to them. So once they've really assimilated that information and then can present it back out, man, they've gotten so far ahead of the game at that point.
Yeah, and I love that because then it seems like everybody gets a chance to maybe be the expert on something or at least have something to offer, because I'm very firmly of the mind that, every student is going to grow. Every student has a next step. Every student has a goal. So regardless of where he or she is, there's room for growth. Even let's say your highest student, quote unquote, they have their next step. So I like this idea of where they're always changing and they can offer something to their group. But I am curious, perhaps you could share with the audience how you did your flexible grouping. So let's say a teacher is very interested in doing this to set up this classroom, which is, to me, sounds wonderful because I do believe that this is the kind of classroom where, the climate is one where everyone is engaged in a positive way, because I also believe you could be engaged in a, off-task way, but where they're actually working and, they have choices, they have say in what they're doing. So let's say a secondary teacher is listening to this. I don't know that they are. They will be. What tips? How would you set that up? How do you even go about that in the secondary classroom, in an English classroom?
I did it different every time. I didn't stick to one method. So sometimes I would do it off of test data or some sort of, formative, summative data that was real hard evidence. And I might do, but even then, if I have all the test data in front of me, I might do heterozygous groups where they're mixed ability groups, or I might do homozygous groups where I put high, mediums, and lows, a group of highs or groups of mediums or groups of lows, and I would do that for a while, and then I'd get bored of that, and then I would let them pick their own groups, and then I'd get bored of that, and I would draw names out of a hat, and then I'd get bored of that, and I would use a random group, thing, or I'd count them off, or do, time partners, the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock partners, and stuff like that. I changed it constantly because I feel like what happens is when you depend on one strategy for grouping, you keep ending up with the same or very similar groups. And that was what I wanted to avoid. I wanted my students to be comfortable with me, but I wanted them to be like uncomfortable in their classroom. I find for me, when I get super comfortable at home, I'm sitting on my couch, I'm relaxing, I'm getting ready to do something, I very quickly get distracted by something else. The more comfortable I am, I feel like, in terms of, in my space and where I'm the most comfortable, I feel like that often hinders my learning. And so I get easily distracted, and I don't want that. And the same thing's somewhat true for kids. If they're grouped with the same people over and over again, even if they don't start out the year friends, they're gonna become friends if you make them sit together all year. There's no avoiding that. And they're going to be able to distract each other. They're going to know each other's buttons to push and keep things off task and so on and so forth. They're going to know which kid is always going to do the work and which one isn't. And I never wanted that to happen. So I changed up the groups constantly. But because I had the relationship with all the kids, it didn't make them stressed or terrified all the time. Yeah, it might have been a little uneasy for them in the first couple of weeks. But after that, well, this is the norm. Shreff moved us again. And it got to the point where, if anybody's ever done this, where they overnight change the arrangement of desks in their room drastically. So the kids come in and all of a sudden the desks are all in different places. The kids lose their minds. They don't know what to do. Yes, they're like, they do. The funniest thing you can ever do actually is if you have like groups of 4 or 5, like say you have a mix, like I used to love making like 3 groups of 5 and 2 groups of 4. And then overnight, I would just move one desk from a group of 5 to a group of 4 so that the group of 5 was in a different place. They don't know what to do. They lose their minds. Or tell one kid before they walk in the room, hey, go sit in a different place than normal today. And one kid can mess up the feel of an entire room because kids get so comfortable and they know exactly where to look for help and exactly who to go to and the directions to look. And they get this very visualized memory. And I didn't want them to have that. Like I said, they get comfortable and I feel like it makes it easier to get distracted. And so I wanted them in different places all the time. And so I didn't depend on one strategy. And I think going backwards, I think that's the same thing with discipline. I never depended on one discipline strategy either because it's the same thing. Once kids know the rules, then they know the lines and how far they can push. Yeah. And if I'm the same every single time with every single kid, with every single thing, then, I go back to, Rick Wormelli, what is fair isn't always equal. That's not the same thing. And so discipline is just the same because one kid that never talks out of line and never talks back to me all of a sudden does, I recognize that as a problem versus the kid who's always got a little smart aleck reply. I'm used to that. I can move on. So, it's the same thing. It's everything about it should be very individualized to what the kids' needs are. And so that's what it is. I don't want them comfortable in any way in my class except for comfortable with me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like what you're saying, obviously, if you have that relationship with the student and they respect you, you're really not going to get a whole lot of behavior issues. Not if the student, once in a while something might happen, something's going on. But if there is that level of respect between everyone, and those are the norms of the classroom, I just think that students are automatically going to be behaving much better because they feel respected. And you know what? Also, even though I teach 6-year-olds, as a mom of a 15-year-old, I do know that is something that is hugely important. I mean, I have had days where she comes home and there's an issue and she's like, I tried to talk to the teacher and the teacher wouldn't talk to her for whatever reason, probably not anything negative, but just didn't have time or whatever. But she takes it very personal, so I think that like level of mutual respect, listening to one another really sets that tone. I wanted to ask you something else. Well, first of all, I wanted to comment on what you said about the groupings because so you have flexible groupings, but then they're also very fluid because what you're saying is so true. They do get comfortable, at where our students come to pre-first as non-readers, most of them. A couple of them might be reading, quote unquote, by accident. It just happens. Well, it doesn't just happen. They have had some exposure to letters and sounds and some sight words. So, but most of them are not readers. And so obviously our groups, we have reading groups. So a lot of them are going to be based on your reading level because we use Fountas and Pinnell. And even though those groups, they change because it changes when you change a level, but oftentimes that you're right, that the strategy itself isn't necessarily changing. So even though students will tend to move at a certain pace, more or less, so a student changes a level and the other kids are quickly to follow, so they end up being in a lot of the same groups. But we do also do like reading strategy groups, which is nice because then that mixes them up. But because what you're saying, it's right. They will get very comfortable when they're in a group. And then also I think students can pick up very quickly on what's going on. Who's in what group? Why am I in this group? They see what's going on. So I like that it's flexible and it's fluid and it is always changing. To kind of go not in a completely different direction, but since we're talking about classroom climate, I'm also curious about maybe if your school has any way that they are trying to establish a positive school climate overall, if there's anything special that your school does.
We're working on it. I would call that a very much work in progress at our school. We are in this weird area. For whatever reason, our district doesn't feel like keeping admin in a place for more than 3 years is necessary. So our principals and leadership team change out pretty regularly. I told you I'm in my third year out of the classroom, and on our leadership team at our school, I have some of the most experience of our leadership team at our school. And that makes no sense. That's completely ridiculous that that's a factual statement. But so a lot of those things, we want to try to build programs like that and get that done. I am working on it personally in the sense of, I think the first step to building a positive climate with students is creating a positive climate with staff. And that has become a passion of mine this year. As I've moved to the curriculum resource role, I thought about what my work had been for the last 2 years as a digital coach and what that would look like when I was over all professional development. And I thought, the first thing we have to do is make teachers actually want to be here. Because just like students, if they are miserable every single day in class, they're not learning. If the teachers are miserable every single day at work, they sure as heck don't want to come learn after what was already a 7-period day. And so I was like, you know what, that's the first thing I need to work on before I even think about trying to teach them stuff. Before I start thinking about professional development, I need these teachers happy. So, I'm coming at it in two different directions. Number one, I'm trying a full-on flipped PD model. So I refuse to make my teachers do sit and get because I didn't do it in my own classroom. I don't see any reason why I should have to do it with my teachers. So that's number one. I'm doing any sort of direct instruction stuff is done as a recording that they listen to online, and then they take a quick quiz or whatever to go with it to make sure they listened. And then now my face-to-face time can actually be collaborative strategies where they're working together to come up with solutions to problems and using models like the EdCamp model or campsite, fireside chats or various different models that I've developed and pulled from other people. And another part of that I'm more just now starting to focus on is sort of the social connections with teachers. I think back to my own first year of teaching, and I was put into a position I was probably not prepared for. My degree is not in education. I was a business management major. And as you can imagine, that's going really well for me since I'm a teacher. But I ended up in education because I loved it, and I got hired because I loved it, I'd been subbing. I've been a substitute teacher for a year, and that somehow people felt made me qualified to be a teacher, and I believed them. I was with them. I was like, yeah, no, I think I got this. I've been a sub. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. My first day in the classroom, I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be rough. I don't know what I'm doing. And it was like all the cards were stacked against me. My room was on the opposite end of this campus from the other English teachers. They were sort of established English teachers who knew the other two were teaching my grade level sort of knew each other and were not very collaborative teachers to begin with. Nothing against them. That just wasn't their style. They wanted to control what was going on in their four walls, and that was it. And DeForest PLC strategies were just coming into our district, and so they were resistant to that change, and I didn't know any better, and I'm just going, why aren't you guys working with me? I feel alone. And so my first year teaching was rough. I mean, it was hard. There were some really tough days. And I look back on the things I did in that classroom, and much of what I have done ever since was going, okay, everything I did that year was wrong, so I repeat none of it. And, every single thing, nothing. Oh, I did that year one? Nope, toss it. Go the opposite direction. And none of it was right. And so... And what really turned that year around was at the very end of the year and going into the next school year, I got connected with a group of friends, not just fellow teachers, but friends who I could hang out with outside of work on occasion, and we could go, to a trivia night together, or we could just go grab an appetizer after work one day or whatever. And that really made all the difference in my teaching career. I genuinely don't know that I would still be doing this if, what we called eighth period didn't happen from time to time that second and third year. And so I want to build that at my school. So that's one of the projects I'm working on this year to build that climate. And I'm hoping that from that, I can have the discussions with teachers to talk about, okay, what do we need to do as a school leadership team or an admin team to build a positive climate with our students?
Yeah, that would be a perfect way to incorporate that whole collaboration piece. Well, I'm interested in so what some of the things that you've already started, like you said, the flipped PD, fireside chat. I'm not 100% sure what that is, but how have teachers been receptive to some of the ways that you've been trying to bring them along this journey and build climate and social connections?
It's been funny. So I actually just posted on my blog today. So last week was our first flipped PD session that I did a 7-minute audio recording of me and clips from other podcasts talking about EdCamp and what EdCamp was. And then on Wednesday of last week, we do in our district, in our state, we do shortened Wednesdays. So kids are in school for an hour less on Wednesdays, and that gives us an hour every Wednesday to do professional development. Without extending the duty day or anything like that. So our Wednesday PD session was a school EdCamp model. And I took anybody that had not done the online learning, had not passed the test, and they got to go with me into another room to actually get the material that I had presented in the podcast episode, and then unleash them on the rest of the EdCamp. But it was intentionally designed so that when I was doing what I'm calling the quote-unquote remedial session, not to their faces, I only say that on podcasts, but it's the remedial session. When I did the remedial session, they were in a room that had wide windows looking out on their colleagues, all getting to have collaborative grouping and discussions about concepts that were interesting to them. And they got to listen to me silently while I talked about EdCamp, which was a stretch for me because I hate doing that, but I had to for this purpose. So hopefully next time all of those people will do the online learning before they come down. But anyway, so I released them onto the EdCamp model, and then the entire school all of our staff had a wide collaboration on 5 topics that they had chosen in advance that they wanted to talk about. And we had one that was about discipline in the respectful classroom. We had one that was strategies for ELL students on a daily basis outside of their sort of sheltered classes. We had one that was on fixed versus growth mindset, another one on motivating the unmotivated, and one on the Canvas LMS platform we just adopted. And I'll tell you, they came in and people were confused. They're like, you're putting our entire staff in the media center? I'm like, I got this. Trust me, it's going to be okay. We're a big school. We had this year we have 2,900 students and 130 something teachers. We're a really big school. And actually, that's small. We just went down. We got a relief school. Last year, we were 4,200 students and almost 200 teachers. So small for us. It's manageable. But anyways, so, and they did. And I'll tell you, in our school, historically, PD is people come down, they make an appearance, they disappear 5 minutes in, and nobody really seems to track it or care. And I looked around that room and people that I have never seen stay till the end of professional development stayed until after their duty day to keep talking with their peers about what was going on. And they shared and they went back and forth. And yeah, they eventually sort of broke out of the 5 sort of predefined groups, but they didn't leave. They broke out and then they started talking with their other peers about like, hey, this is what I just heard. And well, this is what I would do in my class. And how might you do this? And it was borderline magical. And I wrote about it on my blog because I've been doing a constant feedback to go with it. And it was funny because so my feedback is a Google form that they can answer at any point in the process. So leading up to the face-to-face session for the online learning, they were like, I don't see how this is useful. This isn't something I'm going to use in my classroom. This is wasting my planning time. Then I have to go to a face-to-face on top of that. This is frustrating. One of the questions is what percentage of the learning will you use? And something like 40% or 30% had said that they would use 1 to 25% of what they learned in their classroom. And then afterwards, I had them redo the survey again after the face-to-face time, and all of a sudden 45% of them said they would use 75 to 100% of what they learned today. And that pie chart just swapped itself around, and it was just like, oh, I feel so vindicated. You resisted, but you eventually got with me. So no, it's going great. It was a stressful week to get to that moment, but once I got there, I got positive comments from teachers I've never heard say a positive thing. I got positive comments from teachers who have historically sat in the back of the room and played on their laptops the whole time or played on their phones, and they're those students, and they were like, man, this was cool. Like, I liked this.
That's wonderful, because it is, I feel like, whenever you try something new, it's, you get that resistance in the beginning, but it sounds like they were able to see how beneficial it was, which is fantastic.
Well, I didn't give them much of a choice either.
Well, yet the pie chart did change, so yes. Good things happened. Well, Brad, I want to be very respectful of our time, and it has been our hour, and I just want to thank you so much. I don't know if you have any last words or tips or anything you want to say, or...
Well, I want to say for sure, for all of your listeners, if they enjoyed, if they're enjoying your show and they don't get disgusted by the sound of my voice, you're going to be the guest on my show, the Planning Period podcast. In fact, your episode, I think the way we said this, your episode with me will release before the episode they're listening to now. So if they're listening to this, it's already available, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And you can check out Tammy on my episode of the Planning Period podcast, and I think it's episode 14 is what you're going to be.
Yeah, and I'm going to have links in the show notes. And that was going to be my next thing, was to let the audience know how they can get a hold of you, they can reach you, because you have several different things that you're doing, right?
I have a million things I'm doing.
You have a million. Give us a few of them.
Yeah, no, it's good. So check me out on Twitter. I'm at Brad Shreffler on Twitter. That's probably the best way if you want to talk to me. I'm always responsive to tweets. My DMs are open, so slide on in. Or check out my website, bradschreffler.com. I have a Facebook page that I don't pay enough attention to. That's also Brad Shreffler. And yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty much Brad Shreffler everywhere, and mostly the podcast. That's probably my labor of love at this point. So the Planning Period podcast is what I'm working hardest on, I think.
Yeah, and I noticed that you switched over your website, so you have it all. It's a nice new layout.
I love the new layout. I'm so happy with it. I really am. I don't normally do pretty things. I don't normally do pretty things, but when I found this and started playing with it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is I like this feel.
Well, it is, and it's nice and it's clean, and everything is connected on that one website. Again, I'll have everything linked there, but I like it. You have your podcast on there. You have your blog, because you're also a blogger. I don't know if you want to talk about your, what is it? The Ed Voice?
Oh yeah, VoiceEd. I'm also a member of the VoiceEd Radio Network. Yeah, I can't even keep track of all the things I do. So yeah, VoiceEd Radio is a pretty great system as well. You can check it out on TuneIn Radio or voiceed.ca. It's a 24-hour, well, mostly 24-hour, but it's an all-day radio network specifically about education. So they restream tons of different podcasts about education and do lots of live shows. So I'm typically live on Thursday night for On Ed Mentors, and I do other live stuff. I do some of my podcast interviews. I will do live stream the interview. If you want to know what creating a podcast is like, I do some of that. So, and there may be some other projects I'm developing with that network as well.
Very exciting. We will stay tuned, and you're very brave. I think any of you who do the live shows you're very brave to do that.
Yeah, brave or stupid. I mean, those are, just kind of depends on the day.
Brave. Well, you guys did that marathon. What was it on Wednesday? Was it Wednesday?
Yeah, I think it was last Wednesday. Yeah, last Wednesday we did the 12-hour radio marathon. That was so much fun. Ended up being 15 hours, 15-hour radio marathon.
That's right. It ended up being extended. No, that was great, and I enjoyed it. I didn't get a chance to listen to it while I was at school, but when I came home, I did, and that was good. So, again, I'll include that in the links. Well, Brad, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And
hey, thank you. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And hopefully I can have you on again.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there you have it. I had such an amazing experience with that interview. I just so much enjoyed it and enjoyed hearing the experience of how to create a positive classroom climate at the secondary level, and really was very intrigued by so much of what Brad had been doing in his English classroom, especially when he said that he really only lectured maybe twice a school year. I became very intrigued by that because I feel like, that's probably our struggle, is trying to manage that whole teacher time, teacher talk time, especially, and student time. But I do believe that students really need to be doing the bulk of the work. And, there we have it. It can happen, and it can happen at the secondary level. So yeah, I think that there are so many great ideas and so many wonderful things that Brad touched on about the positive classroom climate, the collaborative piece, his flexible and fluid groups, the way that it sounded like his students really, really took ownership and they were the driving force behind the work. And I think that's the key factor. When students have a say in what they're doing, they have full buy-in because they're making those big decisions. I know as a teacher, sometimes it is hard to let go and give our students those choices that we feel we should maybe be making for them. But in the long run, I do think it's so worth, letting students be a big part of what's happening because, they should be. It's their learning, and when they're doing the work, they are the ones who are going to be really benefiting. And yeah, I agree with Brad that we need to be that coach. We need to be that guide. But it's not about us. It is about the students, and we need to really let it be that way. And when we do those things, we see that the classroom is positive. It's, a respectful place where teacher and students respect each other. So it's, mutual respect, and where learning is really, truly happening. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude this then. Thank you so much for joining me. And just remember, I have a few more episodes in this series, so that is to come. I have an interview with my teacher assistant, Miss Dana Quintero. That will be coming up soon. And I will also be concluding my research and reading of the literature of all the basic pieces that go into creating a positive classroom climate. So all of that to be included in this series. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.